the extensive collection of the September 11th Museum. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. JR is the producer, and he has uploaded this full lesson to plainenglish.com/399. On Monday's lesson, you learned about the September 11th Memorial and Museum. And the one part I didn't talk about was the collection. The museum's collection is wide-ranging, but there are three categories of material: architectural remnants, recovered artifacts, and electronic media. We'll talk about each of those in today's lesson. The English expression we'll review is go to great lengths, and we have a song of the week. Let's get started. The September 11th Museum is built into the ground underneath where the Twin Towers previously stood. Although the towers collapsed on the morning of September 11th, some parts of the structure remained standing, and those form the first part of the museum's collection, the architectural remnants. You heard on Monday's lesson that the lower portions of two tridents remained standing. The tridents are the tall steel columns that supported the exterior of the building. These two are anchored deep into the ground, and they extend up a few stories into the airy lobby. As you go down into the subterranean area, you start to see more of the original structure. A 60-foot-tall concrete retaining wall, which was built deep into the ground to protect the building from the Hudson River. That wall cracked but did not break after the towers fell. In the days after the attacks, engineers feared that the retaining wall would collapse, potentially causing the site to flood. Yet it didn't break, and that retaining wall is visible to visitors. There's also a deteriorated concrete stairway called the Survivor's Stairway, which people used to escape the building during the chaos. One of the most vivid images is a steel column from the South Tower. The column should be straight. Instead, one end bends back on itself like one half of a staple. As you look at it, and at the rest of the architectural remnants combined, you can imagine the force and power that would have been necessary to bring such a strong structure down. The architectural remnants connect the visitor to the original majesty of the buildings. When we experience skyscrapers today, we don't see the steel support beams, we don't see the retaining walls. All that is hidden from view, and we get to enjoy the lobbies and the interiors. But the architectural remnants show us the powerful structures hidden from view, the parts that we were never supposed to see, which held up these enormous buildings. There is also an extensive collection of recovered artifacts from the site. There are tens of thousands of items in the collection. Just a portion is on display. Parts of the bodies of the aircraft that hit the towers were recovered. A crushed fire truck is still on display. The front still looks like a fire truck with its bright red exterior and neatly folded hoses, but the back is a mangled mess of destroyed metal. There is also an ambulance with a crumpled hood, a bike rack with abandoned bicycles is covered in dust and debris. Most of the artifacts are more personal. Wallets, ID badges, transit passes, business cards, children's paintings, and singed papers remind you that this was a workplace. A twisted, high-heeled shoe, a firefighter's helmet, and a busted flashlight remind you of the frantic search for the exit. You wonder whether the shoe belonged to a victim or a survivor. The museum has gone to great lengths to identify the owners of recovered artifacts where possible and to tell a little more about them. A crushed helmet belonged to a firefighter who died in the attacks. He would have turned 30 the next day. A corkscrew had been in the pocket of a flight attendant on United Flight 93. A softball mitt belonged to an office worker who was trapped on the 92nd floor of the South Tower. A badly burned wallet belonged to someone from London who often visited New York for work. He was in a conference room on the 106th floor. The physical artifacts and the associated stories invite you to imagine the people these items belong to, how these items fell from 100 stories, and how these small things could have survived such a horrific day. The electronic media, though, doesn't leave anything to the imagination. Small screens play television coverage of that morning so that visitors can see how it appeared to viewers at home. Security footage shows the faces of the hijackers as they went through airport security earlier that morning. It highlights their faces as they calmly pass through the metal detectors, box cutters already in their luggage. There is a recording of the hijackers speaking to the passengers on one of the planes that would hit the World Trade Center. "Nobody move," the lead hijacker told his victims over the plane's speakers. "Everything will be okay," he said. You can hear the drivers of the subway cars deep below Lower Manhattan announce to the passengers that the trains are delayed. You can hear audio of police, firefighters, and building security respond to the emergency call. And then there are the recordings of the victims. possibly the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life. People on that day knew they were going to die, but they still had time. Office workers on the high floors of the Twin Towers had no hope of escaping. They just waited for the end. Some of them called their relatives and left voicemails saying goodbye. In the museum, you pick up a telephone handset and put it to your ear, and you can hear the messages they left on answering machines, the last words the victims said to their families. Images are powerful too. There are a lot of videos, both professional and amateur, from that day, and a lot of photographs. The photos show the scale of the destruction, the desperation of people trying to flee, people injured, debris, the chaos of the day. The saddest image to me is of a man who jumped off the top of one of the towers. It is now a famous photo called Falling Man. It was taken by a newspaper photographer at 9:46 in the morning and shows a man who had jumped from the tower, preferring to fall to his death than to suffocate or be crushed inside. The photo captures him as he's falling, the tower's signature tridents in the background. The man's head is pointing straight down, and one leg is crossed over another. "20 years ago exactly, I've only been to the museum once back when I lived in New York. If you're in New York, I highly recommend that you go. If you do, don't feel like you need to see every piece on display. If you try to see everything in a short visit, you'll just be exhausted and emotionally drained by the end. And as I mentioned on Monday, make sure you schedule some time to decompress after your visit." Today's English expression is to go to great lengths. To go to great lengths is to make an extraordinary effort, an effort that's more than would be expected under the circumstances. In today's lesson, you heard that the September 11th Museum went to great lengths to identify the owners of all the artifacts in the museum. They found wallets, wristwatches, wedding rings, articles of clothing, items from people's desks. A wallet is easy to identify, but a watch, a ring, a book, a notebook, this stuff didn't all come with names on them. The museum went to great lengths to identify the items and to tell the stories of the people they belong to. They went to great lengths. They did more than what would be expected. Who did this ring belong to? When did that person get married? What was that person's job? Did they have kids? The museum goes to great lengths to tell the story of the person behind the recovered items. I've been to India a few times for work, and it's quite a difference in culture. I was lucky, though, because my coworkers there went to great lengths to make me feel at home. They made sure I had someone to eat lunch with every day. They helped me to figure out the menus at the cafeteria. They gave me ideas for things to do on the weekends. Some even came with me as I explored the area. Someone came by my desk and delivered bottled water every day. They went to great lengths to make sure I felt at home and comfortable. They did more than, I think, a typical person would have done, and I'm extremely grateful for that. You heard a few weeks ago that hospitality companies are going to great lengths to attract employees. It's not unusual to see companies offer signing bonuses, extra vacation, higher wages, and things like that. Some cities are paying people to relocate. A few McDonald's restaurants were paying people just to come to the interview. These are examples of going to great lengths to fill a job, doing more than is typically necessary or required. I remember when Game of Thrones was on television, JR would go to great lengths to make sure he was free on Sunday night when it came on. He would do whatever was necessary to be free on Sunday nights. Going to great lengths is not always a good thing. Some parents go to great lengths to get their kids admitted to prestigious universities. But do you remember the university admissions scandal? In that case, what some parents did was unethical and illegal. Still, we can say they went to great lengths. They did more than is typical or expected. Today's song of the week is Brooklyn Train by Lucy Kaplansky. It came out in 2002 and describes the emotions going through daily life in New York after September 11th. Some of the lines talk about riding the train as it goes over a bridge heading toward Manhattan with a view of Ground Zero. The song says, "Nobody speaks, everyone stares, remembering all that used to be there." The album that song is on is called The Red Thread. It's really good. So Brooklyn Train by Lucy Kaplansky is today's song of the week. And that is all for today. I promise we'll be on to more upbeat subjects starting next week. This was lesson 399 of Plain English, so that means you can continue your practice at plainenglish.com/399. We'll be back on Monday. See you then.